to talk about good leadership. In fact, no, I want to talk about great leadership. Often people have this perspective of what great leaders look like. People picture a charismatic individual that just holds a room, someone confident and decisive, a visionary perhaps, someone that always appears in control. But what happens when we take the room away? What happens when your team aren't working together in person but spread across different locations, different countries, different time zones? What happens when they're working from behind a screen in their spare room, or a cafe or an airport lounge? What happens when you can no longer see the people or the work, but you're still expected to lead? Now, I said I wanted to talk about great leadership. What I actually want to talk about is an approach called mission command. It's been adopted by a number of organizations, predominantly military, and it's been tried, tested, and proven over decades of operations, where failure has very real consequences. Now, at its core, mission command is quite simple. Be clear about your purpose and your intent, communicate it relentlessly, and then trust and empower your people to act. Military commanders are explicit about why an operation exists. They articulate what success looks like, what the limitations and boundaries are, but they don't hold on to decisions. Instead, these are pushed down to those closest to the action, where the information is richest, because any delay can kill momentum, and that can have catastrophic consequences. So who am I to talk to you about this? Well, my name's Aaron Thompson, and I'm a British Army veteran. I have led teams all over the world, often dispersed, often in complex and ambiguous circumstances, and often without the luxury of being able to communicate with my team, with my boss and my chain of command. Today, I'm a fellow of the Institute of Leadership and a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute, and I work as a leadership development consultant, helping organizations to lead in a world where dispersed teams are no longer the exception, but the relative norm. And I want to challenge you today. I want to challenge you to think differently about your approach to leadership, to see it not so much in terms of supervision and control, but instead as the deliberate creation of the conditions which enables your teams to act confidently and independently without waiting for direction. That's what mission command is really about. Decentralized execution, or to put it another way, the freedom to act. But what does mission command actually hinge on? Well, I can tell you it's not position or rank or seniority. It doesn't require charisma or control. Mission command works because it's based on 3 simple principles. Clarity, so that people understand what is important and why. Trust, which enables the leader to step back from the situation without fear that everything will fall apart or stall. And finally, autonomy, which encourages decisions to be taken faster and closer to the information. Now, these aren't abstract ideas. These are practical habits that you can enforce today, and they're especially important for teams that don't work in the same locations, don't work the same hours, or perhaps don't have the luxury of waiting for an answer. And taken together, they help to answer a question, what I think is an important question. It was the genesis of my talk today, and that is, how do we lead without control? Let's start with clarity. So I believe that ensuring clarity is the single most important thing that you can do as a leader. Now, in mission command, this starts by defining our intent, our desired outcome or end state. And when we have this, it helps our teams to understand some important context. What are we trying to achieve? What matters most right now? What does success actually look like? As leaders, it's important that we focus on the outcome, the what, and not so much the detail of the plan or the how. We used to have a saying in the army that no plan survives contact with the enemy. Mike Tyson actually suggested something similar. Don't worry, I'll save you the impression, but everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. What this means is that rather than, it means the plans are important, but it's how we adapt and respond to the unexpected which really matters. Because when the situation changes, and let me assure you, it always does, ensuring that your team understands what we're trying to achieve what matters and what success looks like, enables them to make decisions and to act without waiting for direction. As a leader, I used to define quite a large part of my job as fighting information in, around, and out of the headquarters, over-communicating clarity, never just assuming knowledge, and ensuring that my team understood not just what we were doing, but why and how that connected to the bigger picture. Because clarity doesn't just materialize on its own. It has to be deliberately developed. I'm going to give you a story as how this kind of works in practice, but I don't use this story because it's the best or because it's the most interesting or exciting, but because this was the first time that Mission Command really clicked for me personally. So early in my career, we were conducting some training in Africa, in Kenya in fact, and as we were preparing to deploy onto the ground, onto the training area, the situation kept changing. Times, locations, requirements were all in flux. And instead of getting frustrated about having to replan yet again, I pulled my team in. I made sure that everybody understood two key pieces of information. First, our purpose, why we were there. And second, what was important, what mattered the most. We call it our main effort, the single most important thing that must be achieved. Now, a few hours later on task, our communications unexpectedly dropped. No updates. Total silence. Instead of freezing and waiting for directions, instructions on what to do, my team did what they were trained to do. They reacted to the situation as it unfolded in front of them. Now later, when we regrouped and I was able to start to piece together what had happened, what I discovered was that the actions that had taken place actually looked nothing like the initial plan that had been briefed. The situation had changed so much that the plan had failed, but we'd still achieved the intent. The mission was a success. And this is possible because the team understood what mattered. They understood what success looked like, and they made decisions and took actions to make that a reality. Here's a Monday morning test for you. Ask someone in your team, without warning, what do you think our priorities are right now? If they can't answer that, that's not a failing on their part, but perhaps it's a reflection that your team lacks the clarity that they need. As a leader, that's your responsibility to ensure they have it. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is a quick and easy fix. In fact, in marketing, the rule of 7 suggests that people need to see or hear a message at least 7 times before they're motivated to make a decision, to make a purchase. And at work, it's no different. People don't hear from their boss and instantly absorb the message and act. They need to hear it again and again, and in my experience, again. But you need to hear it in different formats and from different angles before it really starts to sink in. As a leader, that's where you earn your money. Let's move on to trust. In Mission Command, leaders are required to trust their teams to act. And the team needs to trust that the leader has their back. But here's the tricky part. This isn't just blind trust. This is trust which has been forged over time through repeated actions and successes, through clear boundaries and consistent behaviors. In remote teams, this level of trust is really important. And without it, what we see is leaders trying to impose a level of control back into the organization. And we see this through extra meetings, constant check-ins, and endless cycles of reporting. But this actually has a negative impact on our employees. Work stalls. Energy dips, and motivation just disappears. But with trust, something different happens. With trust, people start to take responsibility for their own actions. They stop asking for permission. They make decisions aligned with the organization's intent without the need for constant direction. Now, I used to have someone work for me, and they will remain nameless, but they would approach me for my input, my direction, my guidance on even the smallest of issues. And now I'll admit, early on, I would give them my input and then quickly move on to the next problem that was facing me. But I realized that I was inadvertently leading by control. I was becoming a bottleneck. And that's a problem. If I wasn't around to weigh in on a decision, then the decision didn't get made. And we missed out on countless opportunities. And so I forced myself to stop. And I forced myself to ask, what do you think we should do? Now this, I admit, was a rather uncomfortable conversation, probably for both of us at the time. But he had some good ideas. He had some brilliant and valid suggestions. He just lacked the confidence. In time, my requirement for input into his decisions reduced, and his decisions got better and faster, but nothing else had really changed, other than the fact that I had communicated that I trusted him. He came to know that he was capable of making and owning those decisions, and that I was willing to be visible and supportive if and when something went wrong. Now, this is really important because trust scales in an organization in a way that control doesn't. With trust, your people learn to act independently, and that frees you up to focus on your value add, the things that only you can deliver. And it frees you up to focus on leading rather than controlling. Now, contrary to popular belief, autonomy doesn't mean do whatever you want. It's disciplined initiative, taken within clear boundaries and clearly defined intent. In Mission Command, we encourage leaders to push decisions down to those closest to the action. We ask that they delegate until, frankly, it's rather uncomfortable for them. And then we ask that they delegate a level further. Not because we don't care, but because we understand that waiting for a decision, waiting for approval, slows everything down. If every decision flows through one person, they become a bottleneck. They become the reason that deadlines are slipped, that opportunities are missed, and that your team's motivation and innovation just disappears. But when teams have autonomy, when they have a sense of agency over their own work, and when they understand an organization's purpose and its priorities, then they can act, they can make decisions aligned to the organization without the need for constant supervision. Also, the chances are that you probably don't fully understand the issue quite as well as you think you do. The iceberg of ignorance is organizational research conducted in the late 80s, so nearly 40 years ago, but I believe it's still credible today. And what it shows us is that as information flows through an organization, it's filtered to the point that up to 96% of an issue is kept what we call below the waterline. It's held from senior management. There are a number of reasons for this. People don't like to share bad news, particularly if they think it reflects badly on them. Information is also summarized as it's briefed to your boss, and then summarized again and again and again. But this is a problem. Those at the top of an organization, their views and perspectives of an organization and its issues is often warped. They're being asked to make decisions based on partial information. And this is perhaps the strongest reason for you to be delegating decisions. Those closest to the problem will have an insight, an awareness, and an understanding that you couldn't possibly have. But just remember that you delegate the task and not the responsibility. As a leader, you're still accountable, but through delegation, you're developing your team. As an individual, they grow stronger, and as an organization, your capability increases. So, how can you start to apply this to your own organizations? Well, start by writing your intent statement, just a paragraph. Define what matters to you. Define what success looks like in 6 to 12 months from now. And then share it with your team. And share it in different formats, verbally, written, graphically. Get someone from another location to repeat it back to you in their own words. But make it simple, make it repeatable, and make it understood. Second, identify a decision that you've been holding on to unnecessarily, and then delegate it fully. Set clear boundaries, and then step back. Let those closest to the problem surprise you with their insight and ideas. And finally, empower your teams. Tell them what's important, but let them figure out the path to get there. Give them the what and the why, but make them tell you how. Look, I'm not suggesting that leading without control is easy, but it's certainly not lazy. And if we take it back to our core theme for today, the future will keep unfolding. But what happens when you're not there? The mark of a good leader is not what happens when they are there, but what happens when they're not. If your team can't act without you, then you need to reassess. Are you the linchpin or the bottleneck? Are you really the one person that's holding everything together? Or is your need for control slowing you down? It's time for us to stop trying to control everything and instead to focus on developing clarity, trust, and autonomy in our teams. That's what great leaders do. And that's what great teams want, so that they can continue to deliver results even when you're not there. And when that happens, that's how you know that your leadership has really hit the mark. Thank you.